The moment Claire brought the doll home, the house changed. It wasn't the creaking floors or the flickering lights. It was something deeper, something unseen. At first, it was just a feeling, a shiver down the spine whenever Lilith's icy blue eyes met hers. But then, things started moving. Emily swore she left the doll on the shelf, yet every morning, it sat closer to her bed. Some nights, she could hear faint whispers, her name curling through the darkness like a breath against her ear. And then came the scratches on the floor, the laughter in the walls. By the time Claire realized the truth, it was too late. Lilith was already inside. The old antique shop sat at the corner of Blackwood Street, shrouded in dust and forgotten memories. It was here that Emily's mother, Claire, found the doll, porcelain-skinned with icy blue eyes that gleamed unnaturally under the dim store lights. The doll's platinum blonde hair flowed in elegant waves down its back, and it wore a shimmering deep purple gown that seemed to shift hues in the light. Claire was captivated. "Perfect for Emily," she murmured, ignoring the way the shopkeeper's expression darkened. As Claire placed the doll in the bag, the elderly owner's voice trembled. "That is not a toy. It's called Lilith. Keep it locked away at night." Claire laughed off the warning and took the doll home. That night she presented Lilith to Emily, who gasped in awe at its beauty. "I love her," Emily exclaimed, hugging the doll tight. But as her mother turned to leave, she could swear Lilith's glassy eyes flickered. Just for a second. That night, as Emily slept, the room grew unnaturally cold. The air felt dense, heavy, as though something unseen was watching. The doll sat on the shelf, unmoving, its frozen smile unchanging. But at precisely 3:13 a.m., the room grew deathly silent. Emily stirred in her sleep. The doll, which had been perched neatly on the shelf, was now sitting on the floor facing her bed. Its hands were positioned differently, as though reaching out. The closet door creaked open. A whisper, soft, almost melodic, brushed against Emily's ear. "Emily?" Her eyes shot open. The doll was now on her bed, resting against her pillow. Its sapphire eyes gleamed in the darkness. With a scream, Emily threw Lilith across the room. Claire rushed in, flipping on the lights. The doll sat innocently by the window, exactly where it had been before bedtime. "Sweetheart, you were dreaming," Claire reassured, tucking her daughter in. But Emily knew better. The next few days were a nightmare. Objects in the house moved inexplicably. Emily's toys were found torn apart, as if by small, clawed hands. The television turned on at night, always showing static and faint whispers. Claire found deep scratches on the wooden floor, leading toward Emily's room. One evening, while folding laundry, Claire heard the bathroom faucet running. But when she walked in, she froze. Lilith was sitting on the bathroom counter, her tiny porcelain hand resting against the mirror. Scrawled in dripping water were the words, "Let me in." Claire grabbed the doll, ready to throw it away. But the moment she touched it, an unbearable chill spread through her veins. A whisper coiled around her mind. "You are mine now." That night, Emily woke up to the sound of laughter. But it wasn't hers. She turned, and Lilith was standing on her nightstand. Not sitting, standing. Its painted lips curled into a grin too wide for its face, its glass eyes pulsating with an eerie glow. Emily screamed as the doll's porcelain fingers twitched, its tiny legs moving on their own. The room temperature dropped below freezing, her breath visible in the air. The doll whispered her name over and over, its voice growing deeper, guttural, inhuman. Claire burst in, flipping on the lights, but Lilith was nowhere to be found. Only a small, icy handprint remained on the bedsheet. Desperate, Claire called a priest. The priest, Father Daniel, arrived the next day. The moment he stepped into the house, he shuddered. "This thing, it's ancient," he murmured. "It's not just haunted, it's cursed." Lilith sat in the center of the living room, as though waiting. Its sapphire eyes flickered, a knowing look in their depths. The priest began to pray. The house shook violently, furniture crashing to the floor. A high-pitched scream erupted from the doll as its body twisted and convulsed, its limbs snapping unnaturally. And then, silence. When the dust settled, the doll lay still. Its once vibrant eyes were now dull. Father Daniel wrapped it in cloth. This must be sealed away, forever. Claire and Emily never spoke of it again. But miles away, in another antique shop, a new doll appeared on the shelf. A porcelain-skinned beauty with platinum blonde hair and a deep purple gown. Waiting. Watching. Smiling. Miles away, in a quiet little antique shop, a new doll appeared on the highest shelf. Porcelain skin, platinum blonde hair, a flowing deep purple gown that shimmered under the dim store lights. Her icy blue eyes gleamed, waiting, watching. And as the shopkeeper turned off the lights for the night, the doll's lips twitched, just a fraction, into the faintest hint of a smile. She had found a new home.
As the sun set low in the sky, Max and Sarah were deep into the third day of their road trip, winding through remote backcountry roads with barely another car in sight. They'd left the city to escape the stress of daily life, craving something new and unknown. But the last few hours had felt endless as they wound through forest after forest, isolated in a realm that felt more and more removed from civilization. Just as they were beginning to lose hope of finding a place to sleep, Sarah spotted a sign. The isolated hotel, vacancy. The hotel was impressive but unsettling, towering darkly against the twilight sky. It looked like a place untouched by time, an old-world relic in the middle of nowhere. As they pulled up, they noticed the sign had a second line below the vacancy. Guests must check in before dark. Max chuckled nervously as he checked his watch. They were just on time. Inside, they were greeted by a tall, serious man who introduced himself simply as the manager. He handed them an old-fashioned key with a brass room number. As they began to turn away, he paused, leaning forward with a serious expression. "Do not open your window after dark," he said, his voice almost a whisper, as though he feared something might overhear him. Max laughed it off, but Sarah felt a chill. The man's intense eyes didn't waver until they nodded in understanding. As they made their way to their room, they noticed how the whole hotel felt a bit too quiet. Their footsteps echoed as if the place was holding its breath. They entered their room, a cozy but outdated suite with heavy drapes and a large window overlooking the dense woods beyond. The air felt stale, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. As they settled in, Max cracked open the window to let in some fresh air. They could see the faint light of the moon, casting pale beams across the trees below. But in their tired state, they forgot the warning, left the window ajar, and went to sleep. Hours later, Sarah stirred in bed. A strange feeling pulled her from sleep, an itch, a sense that something wasn't right. She glanced at the window and froze. There, just beyond the glass, something was staring at her. The shape was barely visible, half cloaked in shadow, but its outline seemed almost wrong. It was too still, yet its presence was overwhelming, filling the room with a sense of something ancient and predatory. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she realized, whatever it was, it knew they were there. She reached for Max, trying to wake him as quietly as possible. He stirred, grumbling, until he noticed her wide eyes and followed her gaze to the window. When he saw it, his face went pale. Together, they moved slowly, trying not to make a sound. But then, click, the window shifted open another inch. It was as if the thing had been waiting for an invitation. Shadows pooled around the frame as a soft rustling sound began, something shifting just beyond their sight. Then, slowly, something began to crawl into the room, a shape that defied the form of any creature they knew. It was long, twisted, almost like shadows given life, moving with unnatural silence toward them. Panicked, Max grabbed the lamp and turned it on, casting a pool of light into the room. The creature recoiled, retreating toward the window, but it didn't leave. It lingered just beyond the light's reach, watching, waiting. The night felt endless as they sat, clutching each other, too afraid to move. Every time they glanced toward the window, they saw it there, motionless, waiting, as if studying them. They tried to wait for dawn, but fatigue weighed on their eyelids, and eventually, despite their fear, they drifted into a shallow, haunted sleep. When morning finally came, they awoke to bright light streaming through the window. The eerie calm of the room felt almost like a relief. They quickly packed their things, avoiding the window as they threw on their coats and rushed down the hallway. The manager was waiting for them, silent, as though he'd known what had happened. Without a word, he took the key from them and nodded, a slight, almost pitying look in his eyes. They left without looking back, their hearts still pounding, feeling the weight of something unseen still watching. As they drove away, silence hung heavy between them. Though they'd escaped the hotel, they both felt changed, marked by whatever had visited them. They tried to push it from their minds, but as they drove further, a sinking feeling crept back into their thoughts. Even miles away, they could still feel it, a sense that somewhere, just beyond the trees, something was still watching and waiting.